the annual meeting, the vote for the directors tonight. We already had done that. There was there were 14 votes, and the only difference from last year is Larry Penner moved from being a secretary to just an ordinary director because he's no longer capable of fulfilling that role. I will be sending a memo to the board concerning taking a minutes and all that, but that I'm not going to get into it too much now.
Right.
Thank you.
So, let's see what I can.
Is Buffoni joining us? Steve Buffoni?
No, I don't think he has Zoom. He has
No.
I
joining
don't,
the board.
I think he does. He doesn't have. He might have access to his center's computer, but he definitely does not have Zoom. An idea to bring him back on the board with an iPad, that didn't work out because in Steve's center, lots of things disappear.
I think that goes for any nursing home.
Yeah, right.
That's
The nursing home,
yeah.
they can't give it. We can't.
Yeah.
They can't keep
Security
anything of any value.
Right. Yeah, shame.
Yep. Well, we'll be sending out renewal notices next month. Yes,
early next
That's
month.
the answer,
Maybe
Gary Madras.
early, yeah, sometime next month, maybe early next month.
earlier than maybe we originally planned.
So really, there's the only other thing I already mentioned in my president's notes that I was on a set of 211s going into St. George. And the only thing that I missed there is some of the front and back seats. It's now set up like a regular subway car with maximum standing room for maximum capacity.
Good.
And it is really a very nice set of cars. I can't wait till they replace all the R44s. So
yeah, some of the seats are fold down seats too, I believe too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Like on the 42nd Street shuttle.
Right.
well, I don't think they're going to be having that over there. Look, I don't have too much else to say, so I'm going to turn the program over to Paul, who will turn it over our speaker. Take it away, Pablo.
Thank you, General Foz. As Sheldon initially alluded to, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, a merry and healthy New Year that we're all looking forward to. And we're going out in style, so to speak, in the very good hands of Cora Sowa. As mentioned, Cora will be taking us to the Hawkeye State, the best of railfan activity in the state of Iowa. And of course, that will just be in a few minutes. But let's look ahead to the next year, 2025. We're going to start off with a bang on the topic Sheldon was just speaking about, the Staten Island Railway. Next month, January 24th, with the authorization of Andrew Grau, we are going to put on a DVD on the subject matter based on a compendium of Gary Grau's Super 8 movies of the Staten Island Railway over the years. It's something to behold. The narration is excellent, obviously, by Gary Grau. And that's how we'll start the year off, Friday, January 24th. The following month, someone who's become familiar to us the last couple of years, Frank Shearer, will do another program for us on the stations of the Norfolk and Western Railroad. So please stay tuned for that. Frank's programs are something to look forward to. He knows the length and breadth of it, and his narration is excellent. Finally, we'll close out the first quarter with the good stewardship of none other than Cora Sowa once again, And this time we will head down to the Sunshine State just in time for the end of the Grapefruit League activities with spring training. So please look forward to that. And that will all be in your bulletins, and be on board, because as you know, month after month, year after year, the RE brings you the very best in rail fan entertainment. And obviously tonight will be no excuse, will be no exception to that rule in the guise of Ms. Cora Sowa. And without any further ado, Cora, take it away.
Now, let's see if we can get this started. I click on share.
Yes, you're
And-
you're the co-host, so you can do it.
Here we go. Railroads. Can you all see it?
Well,
Yes.
Cora Sowa has started screen sharing.
Good.
It didn't actually just
It
bring
didn't
up.
come up
photos.
yet, but it's circling.
Yes.
There it goes. Okay,
Can
Railroads
you
of Iowa,
see-
we see
Can
it.
you see
Railroads
there's
of
a picture
Iowa.
of a
Yep, yep.
locomotive in Railroads of Iowa,
Yeah,
Yes.
and you can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
and this
It
doesn't
looks
have,
really
this is
good.
not going to have any video, and it's not going to have any sound on
Okay.
the pictures, so
Not a
you don't
problem.
have to worry about that. This is one of their beautiful locomotives. The
Great.
Iowa Interstate Railroad basically has taken over what was the main line of the Rock Island Railroad.
Mm,
If we can get a, why is it not going to? why is it
looks
not going
really
forward?
good.
Oh, why is it not going forward? Because I'm hitting the button that should go to the.
Probably
next
Steve
picture.
Calker will tell you what to do.
but it's,
He's pretty adept at this.
I'd have to actually, I'm not sure what kind of setup that you have. Is it Google
Should
Slide,
go.
PowerPoint? I don't know.
Oh, hit the button in the bottom right to go full screen. Do you have a
I'm
button
trying
in
to
the
get
bottom
it to
right?
go to the next. Here we go to the next picture.
Good,
Ah,
good,
Here you
good,
go.
good.
This was last year's NRHS spring conference was held in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is sort of in the middle of Iowa, just north of Des Moines. And this was a picture looking out over the Cedar River in the background. That is why it is called Cedar Rapids, because it is on the rapids of the Cedar River. And there is here you can see another view of the Cedar River with an island. There's a Mays Island in the middle, and that used to have the city hall on it, but then they had to move it onto the mainland because there was a very bad flood a few years ago, and the entire city was flooded.
Wow.
And so they moved some of this. Go back to the previous picture, you can see the Veterans Memorial building and the city hall, the new location of the city hall. And there's now, forget what they now have on the island itself. Iowa developed a good railroad system quite early. One reason is that they didn't have any major rivers. The major rivers, of course, were the Mississippi, the Ohio, and the Missouri. The Iowa has a few rivers. It has the Cedar River, which you see here, which flows into the Iowa River, which flows into the Mississippi. And they have the Des Moines River, and that's about all. And so
No.
it was just a question of going by land. First, of course, going by, ox carts and horses, and then the railroads were developed. And this was just at the time when Iowa, that whole Midwest region was becoming a big grain producing area. And the merchants needed ways of getting their grain and grain products to market. Now, just here is a map. This is a Google map of Cedar Rapids, and you can see down in the lower, just to the left of the middle, you can see that island. The red marker shows where the headquarters of the Iowa Interstate Railroad is. you'll see that now I'll be showing you better pictures later on, but you see sort of in the middle, there's a little green space here, a little green rectangle, and that is Green Square, Greene, named after somebody named Green. The names of all of the streets and all of the locations in Cedar Rapids all got changed at one point. And Green Square wasn't always called Green Square, and the streets were not always numbered in the same way. I'll show you better pictures later on, but to the left of that green square is where the railroad tracks come in. And where it says, just under the C of Cedar Rapids Public Library, you see a sort of a big structure there. That is a parking garage, and there was formerly a railroad station there. They had Cedar Rapids at one point had many different railroads coming into it, many different passenger railroads. And they had a couple of very big, very fancy passenger terminals. And where you see under the C of Cedar Rapids Library, that was one passenger terminal. And farther up, you see Skogman Realty. That is in a building that was another railroad station. And up in the upper part, you can see where the Quaker Oats Company is. That was one of the early grain processing companies that really made Cedar Rapids. And then the Cargill Company is also in there. And then there are railroad yards off the picture to the north. Along the side of Green Square, there still are railroad tracks. That's where railroad tracks are. There's also a hiking trail. There's no passenger service on the train. Amtrak does not go through Cedar Rapids. There is no bus service anymore. The only way to get there is by airplane, by regional airplane, or driving a car. It's the only way to get there. So I went there for the conference by United Airlines, took a plane to O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and then another even smaller airline to the Eastern Iowa Airport, which is a few miles out from Cedar Rapids. We stayed, the conference was held, the conference was held at the Best Western Inn, which nobody knew how to get to, including the taxi driver. It's located behind a shopping center, sort of to the northeast of Cedar Rapids. And when I got off the plane in Cedar Rapids, there was I'm going to take a drink of tea here. There was a information booth with nobody in it. I couldn't find anybody to ask where to get a taxi. Finally, I found a maintenance man who was moving things around, and he told me where to get a taxi. Fine, so I get a taxi. Taxi driver had no idea how to get to the Best Western Hotel. I finally showed him this Google map and showed him where it was. Okay, so I got there. This is the Best Western Hotel just outside of Cedar Rapids. The front door looks as if it's really a side door on an alley. Here's a map of the thing. In the front, there is a Mexican restaurant, which was actually quite good. And then the hotel part is sort of strings out on behind, and there's a health club, and it's not close to anything. You would have to go find your way around this shopping center if you can find your way to it. Here's what it looks like from the road. Way in the back there is the entrance to the hotel. Now, you figure out how to get there. And here's the El Viejo Mexican restaurant. I ate there every day because there was no place else to go. So anyway, the first day of the conference was all taken up with I don't know why I can't talk. The first day of the conference was taken up with meetings. Second day was when we actually started our tours. Here is a map of the Iowa Interstate Railroad, and you can see that it goes straight across Iowa, starting at Davenport, Iowa, which is on the Mississippi River, goes straight across, goes through Des Moines, which is the state capital, and goes to Omaha, which was where they finally started the Transcontinental Railroad. Here is Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids isn't really connected to the Iowa Interstate. You can see there's a little dotted line, which means trackage rights. That's really the only other railroad in that region, and that's called Crandic, Crandic, and that means Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. And it started out as a trolley line, carrying both passengers and freight. And it has now become not a trolley line, but just a regular little regional. I think if Iowa Interstate is a Class 2 railroad, I think Crandic is a Class 3 railroad, and all it does is just serve the other railroads. But one good thing about the Iowa Interstate is that it has connections to all the Class 1 railroads. At Omaha, it connects to Union Pacific, BNSF, Kansas City Southern, Canadian National. At the other end, it connects to all the big railroads. And then you have a Canadian National also comes into Cedar Rapids. It's just a branch line comes in there. Now, I am interested in Canadian National because they took over the Illinois Central tracks. And that has particular meaning for me personally, because my grandfather, who I've mentioned many times, was a civil engineer, and he was working for the Illinois Central and became assistant chief engineer of the Illinois Central. And he was in Cedar Rapids on an inspection trip, which I will tell you about later on. So there's a sort of, for me, a family connection to Cedar Rapids. It was one of the places that he was doing his inspections. Anyway, getting back to the NRHS conference, then the second day was all completely tours. First day was meetings, second day was tours, and we visited their new world headquarters. Obviously, the building itself is not new, but they have just acquired it. This is in downtown Cedar Rapids. Very nice little city. And here's the outside of the building. And we're all standing around waiting to go in. This was funny. Over the doorway was this very fancy facade, and there were little spikes sticking up, obviously to try to keep the birds from sitting on there. Well, the little birds decided this made a very good sort of little fence for their nests. And behind the spikes that were put up to keep the birds out were all these little nests of the birds, and they were flying in and out. It was very difficult to get pictures of them. Here you can see one bird flying up. There were birds flying in and out the whole time. Here's a close-up of all the leaves and stuffed twigs that they put up on their little nests up there, and they were flying back and forth, but I couldn't get a picture. They were too quick. So anyway, we went upstairs, and they have a very nice employee lounge. And here's a picture of one of their locomotives behind the counter. And here we are, all standing around having refreshments. And this is that same picture that I showed you before, looking out at the Cedar River. close-up view, and you can see the river. That's one half of the river because the little island is in the middle. And the Iowa Interstate, they took over after, a lot of corporate rearrangements and mergers and acquisitions. They took over what was the Rock Island Railroad main line, and they also adopted for their logo, they have adopted that coonskin logo that the Rock Island Railroad used. And here are just the insides of their corporate office. People working in little cubicles. And there's a communications center. I got this picture from their Google Street View because I could get a nice broad angle view of the looking down the street with the Iowa Interstate office building on the right. Now, I showed you that little tiny green square, which is called Green Square, which is in the middle of the city. And if you look on the left-hand side, you can see the railroad tracks that run up there. And there's also beside the railroad tracks is a hiking trail. Now, if you look on the left of that tracks and hiking trail, you see this sort of square, ugly building. That is a parking garage. And that is what it looks like today. There is Green Square on the right, and there's a parking garage. And you see the tracks and the hiking trail. That's what used to be there. This was the Union Passenger Station. Chicago and Northwestern and Rock Island both used that station. That's what used to be where that big parking garage is now. It was opened in 1897, demolished in 1961, and replaced with a smaller structure. I don't know what it looked like. And now it was all demolished, and now, very sadly, there's now just, the tracks are still there. Tracks are still there, but there's just a parking garage. Here's the other station. I showed you where that Skogman Realty Company is. They now occupy the building on the left. It is still there. This little station is no longer there. This was the Milwaukee Road used this station. It's on that same line, on that same line of tracks. But this was the Milwaukee Road, and the Illinois Central and the Rock Island line had their offices in that building, which is now Skogman Realty Company and is commercial space. And this is why all the railroads were there. This is from an old postcard, but these buildings are still there. The Quaker Oats, and there's a Cargill Company is also in there, and various other companies. And you see this railroad bridge over to the right. That goes to the other side of the river where Quaker Oats also had a facility. This, unfortunately, was all I could get was from the back of it. I couldn't get. That's why I included this old postcard to show you what's right on the river. This is from our tour bus. I could only just see the backs of the Quaker Oats. There's another shot of it. Now this is a map of the Illinois Central. This is a detail of a large map that shows their entire system. And you can see that Cedar Rapids was only a branch line coming down from their main line. I've been trying to enhance this map to make it more more useful. The Mississippi River goes down the middle of this map. And I've been trying to get my photo paint to work to be able to, enhance it by coloring it blue or something so you can see it. The Illinois Central crossed the Mississippi River at Dubuque, and it went over. Originally, it just went to Sioux City, but then they decided, well, it would be a good idea if they made it connect to the main line of the Transcontinental Railway. So they put basically a branch line going down to Council Bluffs and Omaha. The line that we are riding on, and again, I would like to be able to enhance this so you can read it. Well, you can see where Des Moines is. This is on the Rock Island line, which has now become Iowa Interstate. So you go from Omaha through Des Moines, and as I showed you before, it doesn't really connect to Cedar Rapids. They just have trackage rights over the Crandick line, Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. And the line that we're on goes over and crosses the river at Davenport. That was the very first line that went through Iowa, and that was very important to the Transcontinental Railroad, which, by the way, they did not at the time. They never called it the Transcontinental Railroad. They called it the Pacific Railroad. And that's why you have all of these lines. And I know in 1855, there was that survey done, and they had surveyed, I think, 5 different lines. There was the Northern Line, which eventually was used by the Northern Pacific. And then there was a Southern Line, which was eventually used by the Southern Pacific. And then the Santa Fe used another line, but the very first one was this one that went straight across Iowa. And there was a lot of controversy because, of course, this was just before the Civil War, and the Southerners all wanted the Transcontinental or the Pacific Railroad to take the southern route, and the Northerners wanted it to take the northern route. And then finally in 1862, by that time, the southern states had all seceded, so they didn't have a vote anymore. And President Lincoln signed the bill into law using the middle route, which is the one which was eventually used. But there were all of these Pacific Railroad wannabes. So they all used the name Pacific in their name. Yeah, the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific. There was even the Missouri Pacific, which never got anywhere near, and that's a whole story in itself, that they never got even close to the Pacific Ocean. The Northern Pacific, the Southern Pacific, they all had the name Pacific in their names because they all wanted to get to the Pacific. And so here's the Illinois Central. Now, the Illinois Central had no desire to get to the Pacific. So there was a central line, started in 1855, went north-south. It connected Cairo, Illinois, not with Chicago, but with Galena, Illinois. Galena is a chemical term that is for a lead alloy. It's it is the word for lead in Latin. And so Galena, Illinois was where the big lead mines were. And it was also close to the Mississippi, where they could get them ship out all of their product. And Chicago really didn't amount to anything. It was a little trading post at that time on Lake Michigan. So eventually they built a branch line to Chicago. And so, of course, eventually that became the main line between Cairo, Illinois, and Chicago. And Galena, the line to Galena, was eventually torn up. Anyway, here we have the, I find it hard myself to find where it is. Here's Dubuque. And then at at Manchester, Iowa, they built a branch line down to Cedar Rapids. They decided it would be good to get in on that trade. Then that was really replaced by a line from Waterloo. That became the main line, and that is now Canadian National. Goes down to Cedar Rapids. This is a picture of my grandpa, as he would have looked in 1900. This picture was actually taken in 1902, but it's probably what he looked like then. And this is the personal or family story that I have a connection with, which I have a connection to Cedar Rapids. He was in this is a page from his diary from 1900, September 1900. And he's saying, this is September 8th, which is the date on which the great hurricane struck the city of Galveston. And my grandpa had worked in Galveston on one of his previous jobs when he was first out of engineering school, and he had a lot of friends there. He also had in-laws there because my grandmother was a Texas girl, and he met her in Galveston. So he had in-laws there, he had friends there. And when the hurricane hit, of course, that was, there've been many books written about that. And the complete devastation of the city. So anyway, he is in Chicago where he was headquartered with the Illinois Central. And it's very hard to read, so I'll read it to you. It says, arranged to begin annual inspection of bridges next Monday from Dubuque. But then apparently he's been reading the papers and found out that day there was says, Galveston devastated by hurricane today. So then he goes on with his own work and obviously worried about his friends back in Galveston. Then we get to the 11th. It's 3 days later, stormbound at Cedar Rapids all day. And in tonight's paper, see that Mr. Ripley's son, Henry, was drowned at Galveston. And Ripley was one of the men he had worked with there. What he didn't know was that was the same storm. That was the storm that had hit Galveston on the 8th. By the 11th, that was the same one that was keeping them inside, but he didn't know that. Meteorology was, was sort of in its infancy at that time. I actually went back and looked up the weather records for those dates, and sure enough, said that the hurricane struck Galveston on the 8th, and by the 11th, it was in Iowa. Bingo. So anyway, I had wanted to see Cedar Rapids just to see what the place was like, that was where he was, and he was in there, had to stay in. He was supposed to be out inspecting the railroad, and he had to stay indoors all day long reading the newspaper. And a few days later, he got a letter from another of his coworkers or former coworkers, a very emotional letter. I should post it on my website. It goes on for a couple of pages describing the hurricane at Galveston. And this man Hinkle, Mr. Hinkle, says that he had been in the war. I don't know if that was the Civil War or the Spanish-American War. He had been in wartime, and he had seen the devastation there. And this was much worse, with all of the dead bodies all over the place, and just absolutely horrible. So anyway, he got this letter a couple of days after this. Now back to present day, and we visited. Do I have the map here? Yeah, we visited one of the principal shops of the Iowa Interstate, which is in South Amana. Now, all of this is taking place right in here in the middle of this map, where you have, this is the same map I showed you before. We started out, we did not travel over the entire route. from Omaha. We started at South Amana, which is just connected by this trackage rights. We didn't go there by train. We went there by tour bus. Started at South Amana. And this South Amana is one of the Amana colonies. The Amana colonies were started by one of those religious groups like the Amish. And the South Amana is one of the is one of those is one of the Amana colonies. And so then we took the train. We finally get on a train, and we go from South Amana over to Rock Island and then to Silvis. And here we're leaving Cedar Rapids, and that strange piece of sculpture up there is called the Tree of the Five Seasons, because Cedar Rapids claims that they have not 4 seasons, but 5 seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter, and then time to enjoy all the other seasons. So they have 5 seasons. I believe that since I took this picture, they have moved that statue to or that sculpture to another location, because they're doing some kind of work on the riverfront there. And this is just looking back. Yeah, this is just looking back at Cedar Rapids. And we're going through the countryside. We're still on a bus at this point. I don't know what this, we're crossing some, let's see, no, I guess this is before we've gotten on the train. So this is just looking out of the bus. I don't know what that line is. That might be Crandick. And now we finally get to the South Amana Railroad shops. Beautiful locomotives. And we're inside the shop. And that train that is on the right is the one that we're going to be getting on. They don't have passenger service. This was just a special train just for us. And this car was the observation car was on the end of our train. Here we are taking pictures. Nice view out the back window. Or out the back door, I should say.
Looks pretty modern.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah. This is a very well-kept railroad. It's just a class 2 railroad because it's a very short line, but it's really up to the highest standards.
Did you get a chance to talk to the maintenance people?
Oh yeah, they were very, very friendly, and I wish I could tell you what all of the pieces of equipment are, because they explained it to me, but we were trying to hit too many places in just one day, and we didn't
Right.
have very long, so I didn't have a chance to really take notes. But they were very friendly and very talkative, and they would tell you what everything was. But I really didn't have time to write down what all of the things were.
There you go.
It's all the chassis for the cars. I think they do mostly the coaches in this shop, and then the other one that we visited that I'll show you later on, they do the locomotives. Oh, and here's NRHS made a donation of $10,000 to Operation Lifesaver.
Mm.
Here you see, there's Tony White is the president of the NRHS. And then on the left, Mike Uhaus, he was one of the organizers of the trip. I think this fellow here, standing next to Tony, second from the left, he was the representative of the Iowa Interstate. And so he was very talkative, and he was on the train with us.
Would that have been Mr. Posner?
Ah,
I think the head is Henry Posner, is it? I'm not.
I don't know. He wasn't.
Good with
He's
those
not that.
stats.
He wasn't. I don't think he was the CEO of Iowa Interstate. He was,
Okay.
but he was just some one of their, one of their officers. But I don't know which one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's a better picture. Now we got on the train, and they served us a box lunch on the train, and so we went from South Amana to the Quad Cities, which is the town of Rock Island in Illinois, not to be confused with the island, which is Rock Island, and Moline, and then Davenport and Bettendorf, which is the one that you don't hear that much about in Iowa. And we were allowed to stand out on the back platform, but we could only stand out there. We only 5 people at a time could stand on the back platform. And so we had to take turns standing out there. Of course, I stood out there as much as I could.
Did the Amtrak trains use that line at all?
Does who?
Any of the Amtrak trains use that line at all?
No, Amtrak does not go through here. Amtrak uses a line that goes across the southern part of Iowa. It's the old Burlington line. So that's the Zephyr that goes through Burlington, and of course goes to Omaha. They all go to Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
So the Rock Island went across the middle, going through Des Moines, which does not have Amtrak. It's one of the state capitals that does not have Amtrak. And then the Illinois Central went across the northern part of Iowa. And then even farther south than that, the Santa Fe went just across a little corner of Iowa and then goes into Missouri and then goes into Kansas and goes to Kansas City. And that is the route that's taken by the Southwest Chief. They use the old Santa Fe line. And the Amtrak and the Zephyr uses the old Burlington line. Now, I think that probably they have added that extra piece on the top of the railing, because it looks as if the original railing had been the lower part. And even as it was, I was afraid I was going to fall off because it's a very small platform. And so I was sort of leaning against the wall the whole time, because every time the train jerked, I was afraid I was going to fall out. And so they only allowed 5 people out there at a time. But this was really great, though, being able to stand out there. Oh, there you can really see that it looks to me as if they had added an extra piece on the top of that railing, because it's such a low railing. Yeah, it looks as if you're looking out the front of the train, but actually this is looking out the back of the train. Now we're crossing the Iowa River. And here we are in Iowa City. That's the home of the University of Iowa. And if you've been following sports, especially the women's basketball, that was where Caitlin Clark went to college, was in the University of Iowa. And she's now, she was Rookie of the Year, and now she's playing for the Indiana Fever.
Go 2-2!
What'd you say?
Go 2-2! That's her number, 22.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
That's what they used to scream. Go 2-2!
oh, yeah, it's good. So this was the old passenger terminal, which is no longer in use because they no longer have passenger service. And so now it's there's some business has taken over. It's a very pretty little building. And now we are about to cross we have crossed the government bridge, because I'm looking out the back of the train. I keep forgetting I'm looking out the back of the train. The original bridge, this is a very famous bridge because this was one of Abraham Lincoln's most famous cases when he was still an attorney working for the railroads in Illinois. He was working mostly for the Illinois Central as their attorney, but in this case, he was representing the two railroads that built the bridge, the original bridge. The original bridge, famous case. The original bridge was built in 1856. It was the first railroad bridge across the Mississippi, and the route was actually surveyed by Robert E. Lee. I think he was a colonel at that time. He surveyed it. It's also called the Arsenal Bridge because Rock Island, meaning the island itself, not the town, has a government, still does, I think it still does have a government arsenal on it. So the first bridge was built in 1856, and a steamboat called the Ellie Afton ran into it, and the Ellie Afton caught fire, burned, sank to the bottom, and the part of the bridge was also destroyed. And the two companies that had built it, one was the Chicago and Rock Island, and the one on the Iowa side was the Mississippi and Missouri, which went between Rock Island and Omaha. And eventually those two railroads became one and became the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific. Another Pacific. Ellie Afton was the steamboat, and it was named after a popular poet of the day, a poetess of the day. That wasn't her real name. I've forgotten what her real name was, but she was a popular lecturer and author, and she wrote poetry under the pen name of Ellie Afton. So this boat was named after her. And it's funny that the boat sank and they did not try to retrieve the boat. Years later, I think in 1890, they had already replaced the bridge with another bridge. The bridge that's there now is I think the fourth bridge that's been built in this place. And there was a big ice blockage, there was an ice blockage in the river. And when they blasted open the ice blockage, there they found inside the wreck of the Ellie Afton. Ellie Afton was still around. I don't know what happened to the wreckage. It was probably just scrapped. This has a railroad on the top line, on the top deck, and a highway bridge on the lower deck. And the first bridge that was built there did not, they all had a swing portion in the middle. And this bridge, this bridge that is there now is already old. It was built in 1895, and it was designed by Ralph Modjeski, who eventually became my grandfather's partner in the firm of Modjeski and Angier. So that's interesting too. But they've all had a swing section in the middle, swung out of the way, supposed to swing out of the way of all navigation. And so now they're talking about replacing this one because it's already old, and they want to replace it, I think, with a lift bridge where it would have a lift section in it. And there is also a dam at this point, and there you can see there's a dam and locks. Here you can see the locks, we're going over them. And the first bridge that was built did not have 2 decks on it, but all the others have had 2 decks. And the reason they put the railroad part on the top instead of the bottom was that, of course, when they first built the bridges, and even when they built this bridge, they were still using horses. And the horses would get scared if there were trains running underneath them. But apparently they weren't bothered if the trains were running overhead. And here we're looking back at the locks. Here you can see the map. Here in the middle is this calls it the Arsenal Bridge. The bridge that is there now is in a slightly different position from the original one. I'll be showing you a map that shows the 2 different routes. The original bridge was a little bit farther to the north, where it says Colonel Davenport Historical House. That was approximately where the original bridge was. And here's the current bridge, and you can see where the dam is just below that, the dam and the locks. And here you can see, I did not take this picture. This is one that I found. You can watch the ships, the barges locking through. If you look on the Wikipedia article, I think it has an actual motion picture. I didn't use that because we've sometimes had trouble being able to get back and forth between the still pictures and the moving pictures. So I just used still pictures. Here's one of the only pictures of the original bridge. You can see that it was built out of wood. Now this was taken after they rebuilt the bridge. It was run into by the Ellie Afton, and in 1856, shortly after it had been constructed, but then they repaired it. And this picture is supposed to be from around 1860s. So that you can see that it was, that it was a truss made out of wood. And here's another picture. Those 2 are the only remaining pictures of the original bridge. And here you can see the swing part over to the right. Here's a map that shows the relative positions of the original bridge, which is farther upstream compared to the current bridge, which is, here you can see that it's farther downstream, and there's the dam. And this is from an old postcard. It shows that at one time they had streetcars running on the lower level, but they no longer have the streetcars. This is from 1922. At least that was the postmark that was on the back of this card. Now, here you can see the Quad Cities. the Rock Island Arsenal is the actual island. Rock Island, the town, is on the shore, and then Moline is a larger town farther east. Davenport, where we just came from, is in Iowa, and Bettendorf is also in Iowa. But so it's north of Moline, but because of the way the river twists back and forth, it is on the Iowa shore. And here we are in Moline, Illinois. I thought this was sort of funny, the side of this truck. Storm recovery, your best call on your worst day. And it shows this house being struck by lightning. Stormrecovery.com. Visit the Quad Cities. I don't know what this building is. Oh, and here you can see a I-74. Now this is a highway bridge. It's not a railroad bridge. Between Moline and Bettendorf, across the, you could just see the sort of the two, it's a twin bridges. You can see the two parts of it sticking up. Now, in the distance, you can see the entire bridge. And so I blew up this picture so you could see. This is what the bridge actually looks like. Opened in 2020, so that's only 4 years ago. So the twin bridges, they also call it the Oculus. So that's the I-74 bridge. That I do not know. I wish somebody could tell me what that is. Piece of machinery of some kind. Oh, and here, this is a brewery, calls itself the Rust Belt. And now we visit the other shops of the Iowa Interstate in Silvis, Illinois, just east of Moline, and it's considered part. It's not one of the 4 quad cities, but it's part of the same metropolitan region. And this was formerly the largest locomotive repair shop on the Rock Island Railroad. The first one that we visited in South Amana is mostly the cars. This one is the locomotives. It's being turned into a museum, so they still service the Iowa Interstate locomotives. However, they have a large collection of other locomotives and cars and rolling stock of various kinds, and it's being turned into this museum education.
That unit used to sit in a park at Omaha for 25 years.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had Union Pacific had a heritage park in Omaha,
Oh.
and it had various pieces of locomotive. I think they had a couple of coaches, and the city of Omaha decided to redevelop it, and they had to export everything. Evidently, they were the taker. I imagine it was donated to them.
Yeah, well, there's another. When we went out to when the NRHS went out to California the previous year at the Western Pacific Museum, they have another of these Centennial locomotives. Now, was that the same redevelopment? Was that the same redevelopment when they tore down that Jobbers Row, that historic? There was that historic row of warehouses.
It could be. I forget. I just remember it happened like in the early 2000s.
Yeah, because
I was there myself in 1995 at the park, but then I read about its demise.
Oh, yeah, because I know that there was that they call it Jobbers Row, which was a historic row of warehouses, and they tore that down and made it into a park.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the yards. And there is the car that we just got off of. than the train that we just got off of. Oh, I thought this was hysterically funny. It says this representative of the facility was showing us around. I said that the locomotives and cars, we keep them looking beautiful, which raises their self-esteem, so they perform better. I thought that was funny. Nobody else was laughing. Nobody else was laughing. I thought that was funny. Yeah, you raise the locomotive has to have self-esteem too. Then it feels good and it performs well.
Did they tell you what the heritage of the locomotives were?
No, I don't think they told us specifically where each one came from.
Okay.
I mean,
a lot
these
of them
are,
were
well, I mean, these are still in use. I mean, the Iowa Interstate is
I think originally they were Santa Fe. What do you call it? What do you call that paint scheme? You know, red and yellow.
Oh, the red and yellow.
Yeah.
What they called the war bonnet, or no? That was the logo on the front. Well, I don't know where they got them from, but I mean, these aren't museum pieces. The Iowa Interstate locomotives are not museum pieces. They are that one from the Union Pacific, the Centennial from the Union Pacific. That's a heritage unit, but this is actually a working locomotive because
war bonnet. That was the paint scheme.
Yes.
They were
War
built
bonnet.
with war bonnet.
well, I thought the war bonnet referred to that. It's like an oval with a cross through it. I thought that was that on the front of the locomotives on the Santa Fe.
Could be.
Yeah, that was what
know.
I always, how I always use it. And here we're inside the shop. There's somebody from the Iowa Interstate giving us a talk on the museum. Oh, I thought this was interesting. This seems to be a wheel bearing that somehow got stripped. That looks as if it had gotten totally ruined. And you look here, you can see what it should look like. And this is what it does look like. I don't know what the story on that one was. I don't think it's supposed to look like that.
It took a lot to do that.
Yeah, how did it get stripped out like that?
Well, very hot, and then there was lack of lubrication.
Oh,
Really, that's pretty bad.
yeah, that is bad.
Good.
And then
God.
it looks as if it had gotten melted. Looked as if it had melted.
That's it. That's it. That's pretty bad. My God.
Here's what it should look like from the outside. This was the office of the superintendent of shops when it was still Rock Island. And I wish I knew what that logo was over the doorway. It looks like two bears. I don't know what it is. I couldn't find it.
Almost looks like Illinois Central, but there's a P there or an R.
No, I think that's an R. I think it's
RCNI,
yeah, it's Chicago and Rock Island.
maybe.
'Cause it was originally Chicago and Rock Island. Then when they merged with the Mississippi and Missouri, it became Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific, CRINP.
So that's probably the original name.
Yeah, I think that's an R. I thought at first it was a P too, but I think it's it's an
Yeah,
R.
it looks like an R. Yeah, I just saw
CRI, Chicago and Rock
Right,
Island.
right. You can see diagonal to the right. Yeah, I mean,
But I
down
don't know what the two figures facing each other on the top. I don't know what they are. Haven't been able to find out. And as I say, we were so rushed. I didn't have a chance to ask anybody what it was. If anybody knew, as we were trying to squeeze everything into one day. Let's see here, railroading heritage of Midwest America. That is the name of the museum that has taken over this facility. So the Iowa Interstate still uses it, but it's, I guess, now owned by this railroading heritage of Midwest America. Yeah, see, I don't know what these machines, I wish I had been able to take notes on these, but we were
That
just
makes
kind
the
of-
wheels true. That machine there.
Is that what that does?
Yeah. It's a lathe. Actually, it's a lathe. It makes the wheels true.
And what is this? I don't,
It makes the wheels true.
It's part of it. Yep, yep.
oh,
Yeah.
there you can see.
You put the wheel on
that
top.
Is that the
rotates.
wheel on top of this?
Yeah, the wheel goes on top. It rotates, and on the side
Mhm.
here, a cutter comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Onto the right, a cutter comes out,
Oh, uh-huh.
and it cuts into the steel to make it true. Any high spots on the wheel.
Right.
But how do you set the wheel on top?
Oh, then
You can't set the wheel on top because there are these things sticking out,
it grabs it on the inside.
or do
If
you
you
put
notice-
or do you
if
put
you
the wheel
notice-
or do you put the wheel underneath this?
No, it goes on top of it. It's on
Mhm.
top. If you notice, the teeth are exposed going on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
The wheel goes on top. In other words,
It goes on the outside.
it goes on top of it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
facing down. In other words,
Right.
But it would have to go, would it go on top of, I don't know what you call those things that are sticking up from the,
the chucks of it. The chucks.
Shocks, yeah. Like to hold it.
Yep.
those are to hold it in place.
Mm-hmm.
Has to.
I
Yep,
guess, yeah,
yep,
I guess I guess those things slide back because they're in those grooves. So they would slide back and then they would
Mhm.
slide forward to hold the wheel in place.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
It has to be true, otherwise you would hear the thumping on
Yeah,
the rail.
yeah,
The surface of the wheel has to be pretty true. Otherwise, it would
absolutely.
sound like the old time railroad. You would hear thump, 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 thump.
Yep. Get flat spots. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, well, you get flat spots if it
Right.
skids, like it skids on the skids. It's
could
got
only-
skids
they can only
on
do
the
that so
wet
much.
leaves. Yeah,
They could only do that so much, and then it goes out of tolerance, and then they get another wheel. They can't do that too much.
Mhm.
Go back to that last shot. That was an interesting shot. Go back one
hey,
more.
which one?
Yeah, that looks like an oil tender. One more. That one right there.
On the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have I have more pictures. I think I have more
That's a
pictures
steam
of
engine
that
with an
one.
oil tender.
Mm. Mm.
It's a Vandy tender.
Yeah, because I thought I had another picture.
There
of
you
that.
go.
Nice.
Steam locomotive being serviced.
Mm-hmm.
Covered quite a bit of ground, Cora.
Mm.
Well, we
Nice,
did.
nice.
So did you get any hints what the origin of the steam locomotive was?
Which steam?
The
I'm trying
steam
to-
locomotive you just saw.
Yeah,
1698.
I know I can come back to this, but thought I had another.
There you go.
That's the same one.
There's a
That's it.
tender.
I don't
Mhm.
think there's too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's being worked on.
There's me
There you go.
standing next to the cylinders.
Mm.
That's it. Cylinders and the valves.
Oh,
Mm.
this is what I was
That's
looking
the
for.
boiler.
Yeah, this is what I was looking for. They have the entire outside of the
Yeah, they're doing
engine
a
has been
complete
taken
overhaul.
out.
Wow, nice. Well,
So are
With
they
the crown
doing these
sheet.
as contract jobs for other railroads or museums or what? Do you know?
I don't know what the relationship is between the Iowa Interstate and this museum.
Mhm.
And that apparently this museum is something that is new, that's just starting.
Because of course, the Iowa State is not old enough to have its own steam locomotives.
No, I think these steam
The Rock
locomotives.
Island sure did, but they didn't.
No, these steam locomotives, they belong to the museum. They don't belong to Iowa Interstate.
Which
Well,
museum?
Well, that's pretty intense. They were able to lift the body off that locomotive, and now they're doing work on the crown sheet on the boiler. That's pretty intense.
wow.
That's
It's a
pretty
good
intense
shop.
work.
Mm.
That's the oil tender.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
pretty intense.
I thought this was or is this the firebox?
Well, that's part. Yes, that's the part of the
Yeah,
boiler.
this
That's the firebox. Yes.
Yeah, this is the firebox.
Mm.
And then the boiler is in front of that. It got the whole thing taken
Well, the
apart.
whole thing is called the boiler. Yeah, the whole thing.
Mhm. Mm.
There's the oil tender. That's a
Yeah.
Vandy tender. A
Mm.
Vandy tender. Vanderbilt tender. Vandy tender.
Vandy tender.
Vandy tender. That carries oil, not coal. Oil and water.
Yeah, now these all belong to the museum. They don't belong to Iowa Interstate.
The UP Museum or which museum? Do you know?
Oh,
This is what did they call it? The railroading heritage. What did they call it? The
Railroading
railroading
Heritage. Okay.
heritage of Midwest America.
Okay. Look it up. Okay.
no, it's okay.
Not that I'm a big expert, but judging by the wheels on that, it's not a very big tender.
What, that oil tender?
Yeah, because usually you would see many
Yeah.
wheels if it carried a lot.
Yeah, that's right. Those are rather small wheels.
Unless they just put it on there to just load it in, just to bring it in. They could have done that too. But those look like old trucks with the lift covers, the jute covers for the bearings. That's nice to see old stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then here's more Union Pacific equipment. Portland Rose. The car was named Portland Rose after the one-time train that was called the Portland Rose.
They keep the equipment nice. Looks clean.
Hey, Cora,
Yeah.
I was just checking it up. So 6988 is one of the Chinese built steam engines, the Jades,
Oh.
Oh
from about
God.
20 years ago.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
that's what's
Oh,
torn
wow.
down and rebuilt. There's
Hmm.
two other engines that are owned by a company called Rail Development Company. I've heard of them many times. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Well, you heard the name Henry Posner pass through you during
Yes.
your conversation.
Yes.
Henry Posner has always been the entire works for Rail Development Company in different little jobs all around the world. Okay.
Now, which one did you say was China? It's a 6980.
Yes, that's the J.
Amazing.
It was built in like 2000 or so.
Takes
So it
China
has
to
quite a
build
few
an engine.
miles. That's why they might be tearing something like that down. Okay.
Takes
And
China to make a J.
it says they have 4 occasions through the year. They use 2 of each locomotive, 2 of theirs, 2 J's. One was for them. Another was for another railroad that finally didn't take it, so they took it. And then they got the 2 locomotives from Henry Posner.
Oh,
Wow.
And if you did see Henry, if he was there at your occasion, you can't miss Henry. He has so thick a Philadelphia accent, he'll knock you over.
Hmm.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure that I even know what a Philadelphia accent
Yeah, what is a
sounds like.
Philadelphia accent?
I know what a
Ask him what
Boston
a hoagie
accent.
is, he'll tell you.
I know what a Boston accent sounds like.
Park the car.
Oh, I guess it is. I guess that is owned by Iowa Interstate. Some of these are owned by Iowa Interstate, and I think some are owned by that the museum.
Good God, it took China to build it. Yeah, they got heavy duty rigging.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got quite a shop.
Oh, there you can see from the other angle.
I wonder when it's supposed to be complete.
Who knows? Probably depends on when they get enough money.
Well, that's always, yeah.
Oh, here we are going back.
Otherwise, it goes in there.
Now we're going back on the bus. We went to Silvis on the train, but then going back, we just got in our bus and went back. And then I went back on the airplane, and that was an adventure in itself. The taxi driver by that time knew how to get to the hotel, and he showed up promptly at 6:30 in the morning and picked me up at the hotel and took me to the airport at the Eastern Iowa airport. And I think that plane was late leaving, so I got on there, got to O'Hare. At O'Hare, they finally loaded us onto the plane, and we sat on the tarmac in the plane for 5 hours. And, it was a bad sign when they said, pilot came on and said, "I'm turning off one of the engines to conserve fuel." And we would driving in the airplane from one part of the airport to another. They said, I think there were 40 planes ahead of us wanting to take off, and there were big storm clouds ahead. And so we couldn't take off, and then we would move to another place. And we think, oh, we're finally going to leave. Nope, we sit there for a while. And then we move to another place, and we think we're going to take off. We were supposed to get back to Newark Airport at 3:00 in the afternoon, and instead we got back at 8:00 in the afternoon. Then I had just missed a bus back to Manhattan, so I had to wait for a half an hour for the bus back to Manhattan, back to Grand Central. By the time I got home, it was almost midnight. It was after getting up at getting the taxi at 6:30, which means I got up at 5:00 in the morning. So that was a little adventure in itself. And the pilot did a really great job of negotiating around these towering clouds. And I don't think that the picture doesn't even do justice to those huge towers of clouds that were rising up. And he was going there. You can see that line of those clouds, line of towers of the clouds. And he did a really great job of maneuvering around those things. I was trying to get a picture of the between the clouds of the absolutely straight lines between all of the farmlands down below. It was just like a checkerboard, like a chessboard. And that's the end. And I used a little picture out the back end of the South Amana shops just as a little farewell picture.
Thank
It's
you.
the end.
Really good. Thank you.
Cora, I give you credit.
Yeah.
You really get around.
Nice program.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did. Very good.
Yes, we did.
And
Told an interesting
anybody who's
story.
watching who also belongs to the NRHS, I'm going to be repeating this presentation at the beginning of January. That is January 6th. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the NRHS.
All right, with Tommy
Excellent.
Meehan.
Very eye-opening, Cora.
You really get
Yes.
around, Cora.
Well, I've been working on this. For one thing, I've been working on this project of doing a biography of my grandfather, and he really got around.
Oh.
And so I've been going, and his daughter, my Aunt Estelle, distributed a lot of his papers and pictures and things to the various museums and archives in all the places where he had worked. So I've been chasing around. But the thing that she threw out most of his diaries. And that's what I really wish
Oh.
I had. And because they're
That's
very
too
hard to,
bad.
well, as you saw, they're very hard to read. And of course, all that technical stuff she didn't really care about. So I have
Yeah.
all family pictures and letters. He was a prodigious letter writer. So I have a lot of his letters that he wrote, writing home. And in fact, many of his diary entries were, I was just up in Dartmouth College in there looking at their archives at the beginning of October. And fortunately, they do have a couple of volumes of his diaries. And a lot of them, they end up with, wrote to mother. You know, drilled some test holes, did some testing on the cement, and then wrote to mother.
Yeah, I also must say, Cora, really an excellent program, very fascinating,
very much.
with
Well,
very
thank you.
informative, with a lot of insight. You know, the insights into the
Yes.
diaries there are priceless. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've been traveling all my life. My father worked for the Southern Pacific. I
Mm.
grew up in
Oh.
Los Angeles, and we took trips. You could still get passenger trips down to Mexico all over the place. So,
Mm.
you know, every year on his vacation, we would spend a couple of weeks traveling around Mexico by train, and then when they stopped passenger service, we started traveling around the United States by train, and he could get discounts as a railroad employee. He could get
Mm.
discounts, and so to me, being on a train is sort of normal.
Well, my grandfather Englander worked on the Panama Canal Railroad during its
Oh.
construction. And it was about the time that your grandfather there was working over there in between Illinois and Iowa.
Well, my
Wow.
grandfather was offered a job on the Panama Canal Railroad, but they didn't want to pay him enough.
No, that was the thing. The pay differential wasn't, they if it weren't for, some or housing arrangements that they had down there, they would not have been able to have done it either. It
Uh-huh.
was tough.
Yeah.
Well, and also my grandmother didn't want to pull up stakes and go down to Panama either.
No,
She,
that was the big
they
thing. They pulled up
they had their
stakes
family
and
in Chicago, and
went down there, for a good 15 or more years, if not more.
Oh.
But they still maintained ties to upstate New York. They were
That's
not very
good.
far from the D&H, the Delaware and Hudson, in that area. And I think it's possible that my grandfather Englander at one point may have worked on that as a train engineer.
So what work did he do on the Panama Canal? I guess it was.
I think mainly he was a locomotive engineer. Because he had,
Mules, they call
we had some plaques. There's somewhere in some of the family belongings came off of the front, kind of like the boilerplate of one of the engines that had French. It was all written in French.
Nice.
Obviously, showing the ties that the French had with it. But this here really is fascinating. I mean, your photos of the museum, my gosh, I mean, the equipment that they had there. I mean, if only
Wow.
my father were alive, he would have loved this.
He will like
that
this
story, your
show.
grandfather would make an interesting story, I think.
It would if only we knew more about
Yeah.
it. That's the thing, there's nobody alive now to really tell us.
And then
Is
they
my
threw it
father,
away.
if he were alive, would be able to, to give. My father's been dead nearly 30 years, but he'd be able
Oh.
to go into a lot more detail because my grandfather Englander died almost 25 years before I was born. He died rather young.
Oh,
And
Well, same way with me and my
that's a
grandfather.
shame.
Yeah, my grandfather died 10 years before I was born, so I never knew him. I
Wow.
never knew any of
Same
my
thing.
grandparents. They were all
But-
dead by the time I was a year old.
But luckily you found the diaries. You see, that's the one thing we didn't,
Yeah.
we've never located.
I'm glad you found us.
Mm.
Mm.
Told the story.
Yeah, well,
Well, Cora, thanks
Beautiful
for the
thing.
program.
Thank you.
That was
Yeah.
great.
Very nice.
Pleasure.
Beautiful thing.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everybody. This
Very
very good
interesting.
program.
Covered
I
seldom
really enjoyed
covered
it, all the
ground.
conversation and the program.
Oh my God.
yeah, well,
that was great.
I said I always learn a lot.
It adds to the program.
What's NRHS doing in 2025?
Well, they're still working it out.
They're working out where the conference is
They
gonna be.
keep changing their minds. Now they're talking about in May maybe having a conference in Johnson City, Tennessee,
No.
which is another place that it's hard to get to. You have to take a little regional airplane to get there,
God.
and then
Yeah.
in
But the annual meeting may, they haven't decided on that yet.